I'm wondering across all of the businesses that you have scaled and sold, what are the patterns or these universal principles that stand out to you?
So, principle number one that I found is when you go into business, you have to be all in. If you have a business yourself or if you have business with partners, every single person that's on that cap table has to be 100% invested. If they are in 10 other things, it doesn't matter how great the idea is, it will fail because everyone's not fully 100% invested in that business. The other thing is persistence. You have to have money sometimes to persist, but you have to personally have the attitude to want to persist. Entrepreneurship is hard. If I could tell you how many times I have failed, but no matter what, it's like a wave that crashes down on you. Do you get up or do you leave the ocean? I never leave. I always get smacked with a wave and I get right back up no matter how big it is. And that's entrepreneurship. If you can't persist, if you don't have that kind of personality to be able to just get up and go as hard as it is, that's something else that I've seen as well on failures when we either don't have the money to persist or we don't have the right team with the right attitude to persist. The third thing I would say is product market fit. Do you actually have a product that makes sense that people want? You can have the best idea in the world, but if you don't have people that will actually buy it, it doesn't matter. So, this is where I say to people, don't go all the way to the end building something, build an MVP. Get something that people can test and feel, even if it's at 20%, where you can give them the vision and see if people are actually interested in it. I've seen people spend years building something that nobody wants rather than building an MVP or an idea of something to see if people even want it. And so I have seen great ideas that other people beat them to market because they took too long. And so it's kind of a dual lesson there. It's one, don't get something out quickly, make sure it's a product market fit, and then two, don't try to make it perfect. Perfection is not going to win the game. Speed is going to win the game. Speed is everything in entrepreneurship. And I would say the last thing, which is very important, is building the right team. You can have a great product, but if you don't have the right tech team, you don't have the right marketing team, you don't have the right people leading it, you're never going to get to the finish line. It's going to be very, very challenging.
So, anyone that is currently owner operating a business, what advice do you have for them to scale from, say, six figures to seven figures, or maybe seven figures to eight figures?
Yeah. I actually think it's easier to scale from 7 to 8 than it is 6 to 7. Because when you're scaling to six figures, it's mostly you. And it's you, yourself, and you, right? Where when
Yeah.
you start to hit seven figures, what matters? People, marketing, which are the two hardest part of building a company. And a lot of people are scared to invest in marketing because unless they have a direct ROI, they can't see it. They're scared to put money into it. But marketing takes time. You have to test things out. You have to put things out. You have to see what's working. You have to be willing to put 10% minimum of your budget into marketing, knowing you might not get it back immediately because nobody knows. I don't care how good a marketer is. Nobody really knows what's going to work until you actually try it. I've seen campaigns for the same exact type of company fail because just because company A did it successfully doesn't mean company B will. Why? They're different brands, different reputation, sometimes different offerings, right? And so you've got to start to build your marketing and what I call, it's a trademark that we have called marketing by modification. You've got to start testing what isn't working. You could do $10 a day. You could do a couple $100 a month. It doesn't matter, but you got to put earmark a little bit for marketing. And then people. People, we just talked about, it's the most important piece and the hardest piece of building a business is making sure you have the right people in place. And I could even add processes in there, and building, making sure you put the time and energy and money aside to set the right processes. There's a lot of inefficient businesses out there because they're not taking the time to build the correct processes. And so that's my advice is focus on those things as you're growing. Don't be afraid to invest in yourself and in your business.
When you start a new business and it's the very beginning, what are the strategies and tactics that you're looking at to gain traction quickly?
I mean, that's a question if you have funding or no funding. So I can answer for both because I would say a lot of people don't have funding and they're bootstrapping. So I'll tackle that first. So, first is, don't be afraid to leverage your personal social. You don't have to have 20,000 followers. I made my first $1 million having 5,000 followers. That's it. And I would say half of them were like family and friends. And you can't be afraid to put yourself out there. Sometimes people are like, oh, I don't want to put myself out there. You have to let people know what you're doing and not necessarily ask for help, but you never know who in your circle will refer you. So my first business, I was putting myself out there to family, friends, anybody that would basically listen. And that's how I built my name, my portfolio, and it kind of weaved out from there. So first is putting yourself out there. Second is getting yourself into these rooms that I was talking about, and seeking advice, getting a coach. It doesn't mean go spend $100,000 on a coach, by the way. It could be a mentor, it could be somebody close to you. You want to have a sounding board of people, whether it's like a little advisory board that you put together of people that you can ask advice for, and whatnot. You want to make sure that you're doing that. The third thing I would say with that piece is putting yourself in rooms with people that are doing what you're doing. There's very few of us that are creating companies that don't exist, right? So if you're a marketing agency owner, get in a room with people that have built agencies, and there's plenty of meetup groups and things like that of people that have done it. So don't recreate the wheel, and that might mean hiring a coach that has done it, but you want to make sure they've actually done it and they've done what you are looking to do, because there's a lot of coaches out there, or what I call coaches that coach coaches. And you want to just make sure you get the right mentor or coach. And again, it doesn't mean you have to go, spending crazy amounts of money to hire somebody. And sometimes you don't have to hire anybody at all. And the third thing I would say is don't be afraid to pick up the phone. It's going to require you to roll up your sleeves to build this thing. And part of that is figuring out where are your people. Facebook groups is a fantastic place to start. For instance, if you're selling a pet product, how many pet lover Facebook groups are there, right? So figure out where your people hang out. Maybe they're sitting on Reddit, right? So I have a company that we have a $500 million sports venture fund. It's a private equity company that I'm part equity in, and it's like, where are the sports fans? They're on Reddit, they're on Twitter, so that's where I'm going to be, right? So figure out where these people are and create content, build relationships, put yourself out there. Don't be afraid to share what you're working on. So there's so many free ways to build a company. And then with funding, on that side, if you do have funding, it's my marketing by modification trademark that I live by. Start putting stuff out there, see what messaging's working, see what design's working. Don't be afraid to test things out. You can take $1,000 a month and that will tell you a lot about what is and isn't working, what people do and do not want. Leverage free signups, leverage the ability for people to get on wait lists. All of that will help tell you what people do and do not want. If you're building an MVP and you do a wait list and you do a small ad campaign to say, hey, here's what's coming, sign up for the wait list, and you get 0 people, stop building that MVP. Or you have to change what you're doing. And so you might save yourself a ton of money by doing that little thing. So don't be afraid to take a part of your funding to experiment with marketing so that you can use marketing as a tool to tell you what you need to do and where you need to go.
And let's say that there's a small business owner who's listening in and they've never really spent any money on marketing before and they are a little nervous. They don't really have a pre-assigned budget set aside for it. And they've got, okay, $1,000 that they're saying, fine, I'll give it a try. Where are you going to recommend that they first try?
So Facebook is still the number one app for marketing. It is more expensive than it was in the past, but it still is the number one advertising tool. TikTok is good, but the problem with TikTok is that it's very content driven. If you don't have the right content, it's not going to work. It's going to bomb. Where Facebook, you don't necessarily have to have the exact right content to get leads. Where TikTok is very, very creative driven. And, depending on what you're doing, like if you have a fitness brand or a food brand, Pinterest is great and it's cheap, right? So that's an example. So, I think it really depends what kind of business that you have, and whatnot. But it's there's a lot of platforms out there, and you've got to kind of test. But Facebook is still the number one. Google's great, but it's expensive, and it's not going to tell you. Google to me is great if you want the low hanging fruit, aka people that are searching. But once you start to go into like video, and you need a lot of assets for that, and then you don't really use the display network. That's more of retargeting and whatnot. So that's not, to me, that's not the top of the funnel. That's kind of more mid funnel, unless you're doing search. But again, that's not going to tell you much, because people are already searching for you. What you want to know in the beginning is people that are not searching for you, can you capture their attention? And that's where you would use like Facebook ads. Start by not thinking of it as a failure. Think of it as a stepping stone. I've had failures in hiring. I've had failures in companies. One of my biggest failures in the last 5 years was a company. It was a new industry I've never been in. It was a CPG brand, and we had very quick traction. We were getting into major box stores very quickly. People loved the brand, what we were building, and we failed because of the operational side of the house. And it's a very complicated story, but it kind of is a bunch of lessons in one. And one was what I was telling you about, is if you don't have all partners involved and all partners concentrating on this, that was part of it. And two, we almost had so much success in the want for this very quickly. We weren't set up to do it properly, and we had major issues with our factory and manufacturing the product. And then we got pissed people off, and then you're sending out product that wasn't good. And so we almost did too good of a job on marketing in the beginning, because we tried to scale too quickly because everybody was impatient, right? And so it was, I thought, was going to be my $1 billion exit. And I was in the first 12 months, I was like, holy crap, like we have everybody interested from Target and Costco, and everyone wanted us. And I literally saw my tens of millions of dollars in my head already before we even had it. And it is still to date like my biggest failure, because there were so many things that were missed on the way. And so, for me, it was looking back and saying, okay, now when I evaluate opportunities, it's not just the marketing of it, but it's also the partners. It's the plan to market. There's so many other things besides marketing that I need to look at when I'm evaluating these opportunities. So the good thing is I walked away with a whole new industry. I knew nothing about CPG. I knew nothing about going to trade shows and this, and there's so many things that I learned from the failure, but also there's so many things that I learned from doing the project. And now I can say I know how to onboard a Target. I know how to get products into Costco and what they're looking for. I know exactly the criteria Whole Foods is looking versus Costco, who cares more about the design than the ingredients. And Sprouts is very crazy about ingredients. I wouldn't have known all of this if I didn't do the project, right? So, as much as it was a failure, and we ended up bankrupting that company, I walked away with so much knowledge, and that's something you can't buy.
So, how do you determine when it is the right time to exit a business?
Oh, actually, one of my failures was exiting a business too early. That's a hard question, because one of my exits, I exited a company. I was 20, and it's now a multi-billion-dollar company. And I sold it for a sheer couple million. But I was 20, and back then that was a lot of money. But I sold it to one of the largest financial companies in the world. And they obviously saw where it was heading. And now the patent that I had is now the patent at every casino. Now, granted, I wouldn't have had that connection to even get this in casinos to begin with. But they are large investors in some of the largest casinos in the world. But what I should have done is negotiated to keep 1 to 2% of that company. And So I think it's a couple things. It's one, do you have the current team? Because sometimes the team to get it to seven figures isn't the same team to get it to eight or nine or 10. So do you have the right team in place currently, or the right advisory board to get you in front of the right people? So the answer, I'll use that company as an example. I did not. I had the right product. I didn't have the right connections. I didn't have the right team to take this to a billion. So it would have never happened. Um, the second question is, would you rather be a part of 100% of $1 million company or 2% of $1 billion company? And that's what you have to ask yourself. And is that even something that you want to do? And so if I own 2%, I could walk away with $20 million. It's going to take me, if you even have a 20% return on your $1 million company, that's going to take you 40 years to get that 20 million. So is it better to sell it to have the chance at 20 million than taking the risk of waiting 40 years? Yeah, it is, right? So I think I'm at the point where I most likely will never 100% sell a company outright. Because if you're selling it either because you want the money up front, or because you're selling it to a team that can take it to the next level. And that determines whether or not you would 100% sell or not. It's kind of a complicated answer, but I hope that kind of gives some framework of kind of the thinking. You've got to think about what you want, right? I did get burnt out. Part of it was that I thought I had to be everything to everyone and everywhere. And you can't. You have to have help. You have to not be afraid to hire people as good as you or better. That should be your aim as a leader. And sometimes when you're building something, you think you have to be in every part of your business, and you don't. And that's how I burnt out. And it's why I sold my first agency in 2014, because I was burnt out, and writing those big paychecks every single month for salaries, was scary. And the truth is, I was young. I had no idea what I was doing. I had an ego. I thought I knew everything. I didn't seek help. I just did it. I figured it out, which is pretty cool. I did. But at the same time, if I had somebody, a mentor, somebody that would just sit me down and say, hey, you're forgetting this piece or that piece, I think I wouldn't have been so stressed out, being somebody that didn't know. So if you're somebody that's just starting a venture, or you're somebody who has a lot of experience that's starting something new, seek somebody to mentor you. You should always have somebody in your corner